Politics got you down? Is your team in last place? Is your significant other sleeping with your neighbor? Well, cheer up. The Julio Rivera Show is on. Deal with your problems afterwards.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, hit it!
We are controlling transmission.
Ladies and gentlemen,
the Julio Rivera Show is on.
Or is it? Are we on? Or are we not on? It's Julio Rivera coming to you on this Thursday, December 8th, 2016. Smack dab in the middle of the holiday season. My name is Julio Rivera, and I am your host on the properly named Julio Rivera Show, hashtag Conservarican, on the Lanterns Radio Network. And we have a great show today. We've got retired U.S. Army Colonel Patrick Murray. We're going to be talking about some real serious stuff with him. I'm a big fan of his. He's written a fantastic book regarding his experience running for Congress back in 2010 and 2012. Government is the problem. And it certainly is, if you're a conservative. That's what you believe. And what I cannot believe is the level of delusion with the Jill Stein recount and all this and all that. Donald Trump is the president. Am I 100% happy with that? You know what? I actually am now. I've actually come to the point where, reality is set in. I've finally gotten over the Indiana primary now, over 6 months after the fact. And I actually got over it a while ago. I haven't really done a show in a while. I feel like kind of out of rhythm here because I've been so busy with other things. For all those who may care or may not care, I've had like a lot of great things happening in my personal life. So I kind of needed to take a break after the election. Like, for the people who've been listening to me since We Are America Radio, before I came on to Lanterns, when I was just a psychopathic, conservarican guy, running around all over the country trying to promote the good word of Senator Cruz and just push the idea of conservatism. Why not actually follow the Constitution? For all of those that remember, I kind of had a really raw edge to me back then. And I guess since I kind of, became a little bit more out there and, with the website and, doing a little bit more media stuff and stuff, I kind of, throughout the course of the election, and I guess, just to kind of have a retrospective, this isn't my year-end episode. I want to do that with Rob and Christian, who have been here with me since the beginning. Rob especially. Christian I've been doing a lot of, short segments with and stuff like that. And really talk about how I've changed in this year. And all the crazy things that have happened. I am writing a book right now, which is just chock full of experiences from the campaign trail. I might talk about my buddy Adam Garnica and who I've dubbed Double A. He's actually doing pretty well for himself. He actually may land a little bit of a little position there. I'm thinking perhaps, and doing his part to make America great. And it was just a lot, between the traveling, but it's really about my life and why I feel the way that I feel politically about the issues that I'm passionate about. And I use real life scenarios. I'm talking going back to the Patterson days when Madeline was a baby and I was just even crazier, if you can believe, than I am now. But that's going to be coming out in the spring. And, so between that, I haven't had a chance to do a lot of radio. I haven't been doing as much writing. But I kind of needed to take the break. I think that I kind of got to the finish line. I don't know how with the election because it was just such an emotional thing. I've never been, and I remember this now, and I hark back to the episode where the day that Donald Trump acquired the 1,237 delegates. I had a show that Thursday. That was back when I was doing 4 or 5 guests per show. Just because I'm lazy, and instead of preparing a show, I just wanted to talk to people for an hour. But I had Scotty Nell Hughes, who's a friend of the show, and I'm a big fan of, and just super proud of what Scotty was able to accomplish. Going out there really in handicap matches. She's actually going to be on the show soon too. We just keep falling through on the coordination for that, but I can't wait to have her on here because I am presenting her with the first ever Making America Great award, which she certainly earned for going in there and fighting, all the maniacs. But that day, anyway, I'm getting sidetracked, which I normally do. I had Sabo on, the great artist that, obviously created the Cruise, the Cruise tattoo shot that was, very popular. I have one of them here in my spare bedroom that's literally 12 feet by 8 feet. That I took to New Hampshire, and we were running around with that. Another story there, maybe something I'll throw into the book. But that day, I remember telling Sabo, the only time I ever felt like I was doing the right thing in my life completely was when I was supporting Senator Cruz's, run for the presidency. And, but by the time I think that all the information came in, I didn't have a problem with supporting Donald Trump. And I gotta say, by the standard of just getting the job done, I couldn't be prouder of our president-elect right now. Donald Trump is doing a fantastic, incredible job early on. Some of the picks have been just really. Scott Pruitt is probably one of the big headline picks that I'm really happy as a conservative. Let's get that EPA marginalized. And let's start getting Americans back to work, and hopefully that'll grow industry, and the price of everything will go down, and maybe all those great things that he promised. Maybe we'll get a president that sticks to their campaign promises. We're going to have an eye on Mr. Trump. I know I'm going to be watching him. I'm not going to sit there. One thing I am not an apologist for this man. I will not do that. I've never done that for anybody. Even when Cruz was wrong. When he took that initial vote on the Trans-Pacific, and I didn't like it, you can go back historically and go through all my social media. I didn't back him up. I didn't apologize for him. I certainly was happy to see him rip Mitch McConnell, though, and give his explanation later on. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of greet you guys and say hello and what are some of the things that are going on. If you care, I know the majority of you here are just here to listen to Colonel Murray, because that would be the only reason I would tune in. Not to hear a crazy ranting conservative Puerto Rican or conservative, whatever the hell I am. Anyhow, coming up in the next segment, we are very lucky and honored to be joined by this great American. Don't go anywhere.
You're listening to the number one source for political, pop culture, and sports talk on the radio. The Julio Rivera Show. Hashtag Conservarican. With no fuck left to give.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, hit it!
We are controlling transmission.
Ladies and gentlemen,
The Julio Rivera Show is on.
And popping, coming to you this Thursday evening, December 8th, 2016. Look at me, I forgot what day it was, because I'm so excited. Joining me now, we have U.S. Army retired Colonel Patrick Murray, and we're going to talk about Secretary of State, the Middle East, and a couple of very interesting things. But first, let me bring him on. Patrick, how are you today, Colonel Murray?
Outstanding, Julio. What a pleasure to be on.
All right, thank you so much for joining me. A lot has been made about some of the names that are being circulated right now for the Secretary of State position. People, somewhat controversially, people have been talking about perhaps Romney, John Bolton, and a couple of other names. Let me just ask you, what do you think it takes right now, based on coming off of piggybacking off of Obama and the disaster that the world has turned to and our standing has turned to on the international stage? What are you looking for specifically in the Secretary of State?
Well, so you're starting with the easy questions, huh? The Middle East, the world, is less safe after 8 years of Barack Obama. Now, Julio, we can't solve all the problems in the Middle East, but what we need is a very concerted approach that tries to facilitate stability over there and also rebuilds relations with our allies, such as Israel, and names our enemies, such as Islamic extremist terrorists like ISIS. Now, there are a number of people that I know that President-elect Trump is looking at. I used to work for one of them, and there is...
I lost you there.
Than Ambassador John Bolton, and he would stand up in good stead as Secretary of State.
All right, fantastic. So you're a fan of Bolton. Now, let me ask you a question. You started in the military during the Reagan years, during the Reagan era, and the world was a little bit different back then. I mean, maybe a lot different, obviously, because we're not facing, the threat of expanded socialism through the USSR and other measures like that, because it doesn't only boil down to that when you're discussing a position like Secretary of State. Now, what do you think our position is now, or what our strategy should be as far as dealing with kind of a sensitive situation there, where you have, Russia's position, and there it seems like they're standing with Assad and his regime. You've got the growth of ISIS in the region. What do you think is the best strategy to take there right now that you would like to see from a Secretary of State?
Well, you're laying it out very well, because it's a very complicated situation, and if you have to learn to think 2 or 3 moves down the chessboard, as it were. And but one thing I know that we've had a problem with over the last 8 years, Julio, is that these strongmen in the world, bullies, if you will, whether it's Putin in Moscow, whether it's ISIS in Raqqa, or the mullahs in Tehran, they respond and understand one thing, and that is strength. And I think over the last 8 years, Barack Obama has had it exactly wrong. He's felt that our strength, our strong military is provocative, and that if we can just sit down and around the campfire, kumbaya, we can they think. And so this is one of the reasons that I supported Donald Trump way back during the primaries, because I believe he got it. And he talked about the fact that, for example, dealing with ISIS, you mentioned that I came in the military during the Cold War. He analogized dealing with radical Islam sort of the way we dealt with communism, in the fact that it's not going to be a short-term solution there. This is an ideological struggle we have with radical Islam, and it's going to take some time. Now, groups like ISIS, which are a direct threat to us, shouldn't take as long as they have. Obama's been running, 10, 12 sorties a day? We should be doing that per hour. We could take these guys out a lot quicker. We're making progress. We're almost working well through Mosul, but we're going to have to go in through Raqqa. And when you're talking about Russia, we need to have a come to Jesus meeting, as it were, with Putin. And I think they'll do that because we have a lot of mutual interests. Fighting radical Islam is one of them that we can work with Russia on in the Middle East.
Well, you know what? The Middle East is a tricky region, and I know, like, Assad obviously has done some horrific things to the citizens there, and the uprising and the rebels that were there and whatnot. But there was also gassing of some innocents, unfortunately, and we've seen this with Saddam Hussein in the way that he treated the Kurds. But I've always been of the mindset that like you said, the only thing that a lot of these people in these, third world kind of mentality that they have, that they understand is strength. So in order to maintain some semblance of order, a lot of times these horrific dictators have had to use force. Now, I've always felt that I'd rather them find a way to deal with it themselves than, us having to send our boys there and put our boots on the ground to handle those situations. Now, now with the power vacuum, with the way that Barack Obama has handled, obviously, the situation in the Middle East, now we've had the rise of ISIS, but I believe that we should go back to just really, like you're saying, just really extreme force. I'm talking carpet bombing, just completely annihilate the principles and whoever's the people that are in charge of whatever their structures are. Take that oil back that they're profiting off of on a daily basis. ISIS right now is a budding economic force in a sense with the gains that they've made. I think once that can be marginalized and they can be destroyed, then that gives less of a chance for their name to perpetuate through these, radicalization circles where, we wind up, we're having attackers here and, pledging that their attack and their allegiance is to a force like ISIS.
Well, good point. Let me unpack that a little bit. Back to Assad. Yeah, he is the biggest butcher of the 21st century. But he is exactly zero threat to the United States of America. Mm-hmm. He is a problem when it comes to stability in the Middle East with our ally Israel, and he's also aligned clearly with the mullahs in Iran, the guys that we gave this great nuclear deal. So I think that that's why I said we need to work with Russia to focus on the Islamic extremist groups in Syria and up in northern Iraq, because those are, especially ISIS, are the threats to us. And you've got the Kurds in there who are a willing ground force. But then you get sideways with Turkish President Erdogan. I mean, it's just you make one move, then it impacts two or three other things. Now, as far as but we can still do that, and we need to do it from the position of U.S. national security interests. Another reason that I support President-elect Trump. He's talked about an America-first foreign policy, and so that's what we need to. That's how we need to approach these issues, and that would be mitigating Iran. That would be taking out ISIS. And we've got smart bombs. We don't need to carpet bomb. We have smart bombs, so we have Iraqi troops on the ground, Kurdish troops on the ground that we can support and provide air cover for, and that's how I would approach ISIS. You mentioned their economic prowess. You're exactly right. Think about this. They're running. They were making as recently as last summer about $50 million a month on oil revenues, and they were driving trucks that they've seized from Iraq and elsewhere into Turkey, selling their oil, and Obama didn't want to take those trucks out. Why? Because he was worried about environmental damage. Are you kidding me? Just unconscionable. So it starts with leadership. It starts at the top. That's going to change here in about 50 days, January 20th, 2017. And then we need to start rebuilding our military just like Ronald Reagan did when I came in. That was one of the reasons I joined, because I heard that clarion call from him, and I think others will too. And so that's my approach. You need hard power, but you also need soft power. You need to know who your friends are, and you need to know who your adversaries are, and act accordingly.
Yep, that's one thing we've definitely done is kind of turn our back on some of our allies and seemingly befriend some of the biggest threats to to peace in the world, like with the Iran deal. Let me actually ask you, right? It seems like, and this is just me, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like we have a lot of elements that are perhaps sympathetic to what's going on in the Middle East from the radical perspective. Because I think Huma Abedin playing that close to Hillary Clinton the entire time that she was Secretary of State, giving her connections to the Muslim Brotherhood, and we all know that a lot of these groups that fund terrorism that are offshoots of them, to have that close of an access, and some of the questionable decisions that John Kerry has made, getting Barack Obama out, and getting a real, a pro-American Secretary of State would obviously help. What do you think? Like, what was your impression of the way things have unfolded, seeing the Iraq. I remember, if I remember correctly, the Iran deal came out on a Saturday night. Nobody really had an idea that they were so far along in any kind of negotiation with them. And when they made the initial announcement, I believe it was last summer. Was it 2 summers ago? I forgot when it was. It was actually, it's been a while since the actual the framework of the Iran deal was announced. But how do you feel about what's going on during the Obama administration in the State Department?
Well, I worked in the State Department. I was on an exchange program when I was back when I was a major and a lieutenant colonel in the Army. The Department of Defense and the Department of State had this deal where they exchange 50 military officers and 50 diplomats and go over there, and it's sort of a cross-pollinization. I think it's a good thing. But I'll tell you what, Julio, it opened my eyes about what our State Department is and the diplomacy therein and their approach. This was during the George W. Bush administration when I was in there. And what I learned and realized is that the State Department is every bit as liberal as our mainstream media.
Wow.
Think about that.
Yeah.
And the ramifications thereof. So we were pursuing, this is where I first started working for then Under Secretary of State John Bolton, and then I went to New York with him when he became the ambassador to the United Nations. So I worked with him for quite a while. I know him, and I know his temperament and his intellect and everything else, and that's why I support him for Secretary of State. But our State Department needs a lot of changes, just like our Department of Veteran Affairs does. But this is our diplomacy, our diplomatic arm of the United States government, of the president. So it's problematic, and they are not happy over there that Donald Trump is about to be the president of the United States. But you know what? They have to be professionals, and they have to pursue his foreign policy initiatives. And I hope that they do that, because that's how we're going to get things done abroad diplomatically as he rebuilds our military, which, as you know, you can't just flip a switch and turn all this stuff back on. It's going to take years. Our levels of readiness in the military are well below what is acceptable. And it's going to take some time to turn all that back on. But we can do it, and we will do it.
Okay, one stat that I want to throw at you: 22 veterans commit suicide a day. Obviously, there's fundamental breakdowns in our Veterans Affairs system, in the way that they deal and the way that they treat these heroes that deserve so much better than they've been given under Barack Obama. Now, as far as for the director of the VA, who do you like, and what changes? Let's say, Colonel Murray was in that position. What would you do to try to address the issues that veterans are facing now?
Great question, and and I hope your listeners heard your stat, and it's exactly right. 22 veterans a day take their own life. There's a great organization out there called 22 Kill, and I hope your listeners will go Google that and support them. This is a national tragedy. 22 a day. There are the post-traumatic stress disorder and wounds and injuries. I mean, some people come back physically whole but not mentally whole, and I'm fortunate to not have had to deal with that, but I have friends who have. So the Veterans Administration can help a lot, and if you actually listen to what Trump's talked about, and he's talked about putting more focus on these psychological issues, on PTSD, bringing in more people to help with that. And I think that's one thing that's critical. But the other thing, Department of Veterans Affairs is when Trump talks about draining the swamp inside of the Beltway. Look, I live inside the Beltway. I know what the federal government's about. I wrote a book called Government is the Problem. And nowhere is that more accurate, more valid than the Department of Veterans Affairs. And the bureaucracy, I have to deal with it on a personal level. The bureaucracy is just overwhelming. And you have some issue and you think, oh, I got to call these people and deal with them. I just never mind. And that's what happens. And so that's on my level. The people who have serious issues with PTSD, that contributes to the fact that we have 22 veterans per day that kill themselves, that take their own lives after serving their country in Afghanistan or Iraq or elsewhere. So there's a lot that needs to be done. I think he has a lot of good ideas, a lot of initiatives. To your question about who, I'll tell you what, that's going to be a tough job. And I know there have been 2 or 3 or 4 names thrown out there. Pete Heathcote is one, and Scott Brown is another. Both are military veterans. Scott Brown was a United States senator. He's a good guy. I'll tell you something. I'll tell you somebody off that other people are talking about. Mitt Romney has been talked about for Secretary of State. I don't advocate that, and I have some pain with Mitt Romney about what he said about Trump during the campaign, you know? But if Trump can get over it, I can. And Romney is a turnaround artist. You think about the Olympics that he turned around, and Massachusetts when he was governor. I would be happy if Mitt Romney totally embraced the Department of Veterans Affairs and went in there. I think he could turn that around. We need a turnaround artist in that position, somebody that thinks out of the box and that can make things happen as a businessman, and he will be a cabinet secretary.
Wow, you know what? I can't say that I disagree with that at all. I also wanted to ask you this because you ran a couple of times in 2010 and in 2012 for Congress. Now, when you consider the effect of the Trump platform, how fast can he do things? He has to go through Congress and all those issues. If you were in Congress today, thinking about Trump's 100-day plan and what he can accomplish and how can he accomplish it and whatnot, what do you think would be the best strategy for Trump and for the Congress right here to try to, at the very least, get the economy starting to move in the right direction again in the first 100 days?
Terrific question. One brilliant move I think he did was to make Reince Priebus his chief of staff. So think about this. Reince Priebus and Paul Ryan are childhood friends. They're both from Wisconsin. They've known each other forever. They're like, your best, you call your best buddy and you just, shoot the breeze, right? You go out and have an adult beverage. You go, that's the relationship they have. And when you talk about getting things done quickly, when you've got the chief of staff of the President of the United States, who is best buddies with the Speaker of the House in Congress, things are going to move. I just hope Mitch McConnell is ready to keep up. They're going to facilitate legislation, and they're going to get it moving, and they're going to do it quickly, and there's going to be...
Hello? I think I lost you.
Avenue to Congress that it's not happening. We all know Barack Obama didn't even talk to Democrat leaders. I mean, he was just sort of a standalone guy. Trump's a deal maker, Julio. He's a deal maker. And he put a guy in his chief of staff spot that has an open door to the Speaker of the House, that are friends, that can work together. I think you're going to see things happen very quickly, at least by Washington, D.C. standards.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I want to just go, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody where they can get your book and a little bit about your book and what where they can contact you online.
Well, the book came out from those runs for Congress that I did, and arguably the second or third most liberal congressional district in America here in Northern Virginia. But whatever. But it was a great opportunity, and it opened a lot of doors, and it also showed me a lot about what's going on with the federal government, which led to me writing a book called Government is the Problem. and how far we deviated from our founders. And so you can get that on Amazon. I think it's under the author's name, my name, Colonel Patrick Murray, Government is the Problem. I'm on Facebook. That's where I do most of my stuff. It's just Patrick Murray. I have a website called GoPatrickMurray.com. And my Twitter is GoPatrickMurray. And what a pleasure to be on with you today.
Hey, thank you so much for joining me, Colonel Murray. And you know what? Government is the problem is exactly right, and that's the perfect name for a book. Thank you for joining me. That was fantastic, and we hope to have you on soon. Coming up after the break, we have more shows, so don't go anywhere.
Find the Lanterns Radio Network on Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, iTunes.
They can intercept this transmission at any time, so I'll be brief. The fight is here. The time is now. Go behind enemy lines.
YouTube, and other social media by searching keyword Lanterns Buzz or Lanterns Radio Network.
You're listening to the number one source for political, pop culture, and sports talk on the radio. The Julio Rivera Show. Hashtag Conservarican. With no fuck left to give.
We are controlling transmission.
Ladies and gentlemen,
The Julio Rivera Show is on.
We are back, and I'm going to do something a little interesting here. There's a couple of stories that I want to just go ahead and run down and give you what my assessment is. Hold on a second. Okay. This Time Warner monopoly issue with AT&T, cable should not run that way. Cable should not run that way where just a consolidated group of members are deciding what they're going to put out. What are they going to feed into the minds of people? And it's too much of a reach, too much of a large reach, because they're feeding misinformation. When the media becomes a tool of special interest, that's when it's truly dangerous. And I just want to leave that there and just and think about that, and we will talk next week on Thursday.